What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats of every one of the weapons in Modern Warfare, and in today's episode we're going to be covering the brand new SMG that came with Season 5. This is the ISO, which is based off of the B&T APC-9. And hopping right into it, let's kick it off with the damage profile. Now, just like with most of the SMGs, we have the damage it applies to the limbs, and then we have the damage it applies to your entire torso. Of course, torso shots are going to deal more damage, and with the ISO, the torso damage profile is 25, 20, 19, 16. This damage profile is nearly identical to the P90, the MP7, and the Fennec, and this means the gun is going to be a 4 to 7 shot kill to the torso. As for headshots, we get a 1.44 times multiplier, and this means that in some situations headshots are going to be helping you, but you're often going to have to hit more than one headshot in a row in order for it to reduce the number of shots to kill. When it comes to rate of fire, it's 900 rounds per minute, which is a very fast rate of fire, so it's a very forgiving gun. But keep in mind, compared to the guns that I listed earlier that have basically the same damage profile, this is the slowest out of all of them, so it's a little bit slower than even the P90. And what this means for our time to kill potential is up close in that 4-shot kill range, our time to kill is 200 milliseconds. Now, 200 milliseconds is a very competitive time to kill, but when you compare that with every single base SMG in the game, this is the slowest time to kill in the SMG category. Now, it's really only a few milliseconds slower than some of the other SMGs, so you're still killing them on the same frame, but I did want to point out the fact that this doesn't excel in the time to kill department when you put it side by side with the other SMGs in the game. But time to kill isn't everything. Let's have a look at our ranges. And one nice upside with the ISO is it's got a very respectable 4-shot kill range for an SMG. That's a pretty decent maximum damage range. And this is better than the comparable guns like the P90, for instance, which would be the closest comparable gun. As for our 5-shot kill range, this is a very short range window before it drops off to the 6-shot kill, which extends out to 35 meters, which is pretty decent, I guess, for an SMG, but you probably still shouldn't be challenging people beyond that sort of range. As for suppressors, the lightweight suppressor reduces our ranges by 25%, so generally I would say stay away from the lightweight suppressor, whereas the monolithic suppressor actually increases our ranges by about 7.5%, so it's practically negligible, but there is a slight range increase. Then taking a look at hardcore, I just wanted to mention the ISO is always going to take you at least 2 shots to kill in hardcore game modes. And it's also worth noting, beyond 35 meters, if you shoot an enemy in the limbs, it's going to take you 3 shots to get a kill. So while every gun is usable in hardcore, this gun doesn't really stand out in any way. Moving on to hipfire, the ISO is actually tied with the MP7 as having the best hipfire spread in the SMG category. I mean, all of the SMGs are very, very close here, but the MP7 and ISO are just a little bit better. When it comes to idle sway, as you can see here, there is definitely some sway while aiming down sight with this, which is what we expect with an SMG, so nothing too surprising here. Then I want to have a look at recoil, and this is something interesting with the ISO. It doesn't really seem like it has much recoil, and I would consider it to be fairly controllable, especially for the ranges that you should be challenging enemies in. However, the big thing to notice here is there is a huge jump between your first and second shot with this gun. Now, right up close and personal, this isn't going to be a problem for you, but if you are trying to stretch the range out a little bit, you really have to be aware of that first shot recoil because it could easily throw you off target. Now, moving on to our handling stats, our aim down sight time is 200 milliseconds, which is very standard for an SMG, and our sprint out time is very fast at just 117 milliseconds, whereas our tactical sprint out time is 217 milliseconds. Both of these are pretty standard for SMGs. As for our base magazine capacity, this is one of the big downsides of this gun. It's only 20 rounds, which with that really high rate of fire, you burn through these mags pretty much instantly. And you also only get 40 rounds in reserve. Now, having said this, if you want more reserve ammo, I'd recommend pairing this with a 9mm pistol that is also using fully loaded because it will share ammo with that, and then you won't have to worry nearly as much about your total ammo count. As for our reload time, we've got a very solid reload time at just 1.3 seconds, and with sleight of hand, you can cut that all the way down to 0.78 seconds, which is the fastest reload in the game for a primary weapon. So yeah, the magazine capacity really sucks, but at least you do have a pretty quick reload with this gun. As for our movement speed, this is very solid at 98.5%. It's not the fastest SMG out there, but it is very, very fast. And our aim down sight straight speed is also kind of average for an SMG at 62%. So that pretty much covers it for the basic stats of this gun. However, we do have several unique attachments that I want to cover as well, and let's kick it off with the barrel attachments. Now the ISO has 4 different barrels, and the first one is the Dominator barrel, and with this we get a 20% increase to our damage range, which is a nice little boost. And on top of this, it helps with bullet velocity, which is going to help us hit those moving targets at longer ranges, even though you shouldn't really be using this at longer ranges. And the only downside to this is our aim down sight time is slowed down by 2 frames at 60 FPS, so it's now going to be 234 milliseconds. Moving on to the second barrel, this is the Revolution barrel, and with this one we get a 35% increase to our damage range, so a little bit better than the previous one. Also, we once again get a boost to our bullet velocity, and on top of this, our recoil control is improved, which if we have a look at the side-by-side right here, you can see that it definitely helps with that first shot recoil, which is really nice. But aside from that, the total magnitude of our recoil is still roughly the same as without this barrel. As for the downsides, our aim down sight speed is slowed down the same as the previous barrel actually, at 234 milliseconds, so 2 frames slower at 60 FPS. And then another downside with this barrel is our overall movement speed is reduced by about 3%. Moving on, the next barrel we've got here is the CQB barrel, and with this one, it improves our aim down sight speed by just 1 frame at 60 FPS, so our new aim down sight time is 184 milliseconds, which is honestly hardly even noticeable. And on top of this, our overall movement speed is improved by about 1%. The downsides to this though is, first up, we get a loss of bullet velocity, which also ends up translating to a 10% decrease to our range values. And on top of this, there is a noticeable amount of extra recoil with this barrel as well. You can see there's a lot more side-to-side bounce there, and a higher total magnitude of recoil. As a result, I would say just stay away from this barrel. You're hardly even going to notice the upsides, and the downsides are quite noticeable. But finally for barrels, we've got one last one, and this one's quite special. This is the Nightshade barrel, and with this, it's got an integrated suppressor, which keeps you off the radar, which is nice, although that does also block the muzzle attachment for this gun. Our damage range is also increased by 45%, so we get the best range increase out of all the barrels, which is a huge increase, by the way. Then we get a nice improvement to our recoil control, which you can very clearly see here. There's definitely an improvement when it comes to recoil control, and our bullet velocity is also improved. Now, all of these upsides do come with some pretty hefty downsides as well, though. Our aim down sight time is slowed down by 3 frames at 60 FPS, so our new aim down sight time is 250 milliseconds, which is a bit on the slow side for an SMG, but I mean, it's still fast for an assault rifle, for instance, so it's not like it's painfully slow. It's just going to be noticeably slower than the base version of this gun. And on top of this, our overall movement speed is slowed down by 4%, which is a very noticeable reduction to our movement speed. We're now at about assault rifle levels when it comes to that. So this barrel definitely has some awesome upsides, and depending on your playstyle, it's a great option. However, just keep in mind, you are reducing your handling and mobility down to assault rifle levels. So with that, that's going to wrap it up for the barrel attachments for this. However, we also have our magazine attachments. The first one is the 30 round extended mag, which I highly recommend using the moment you unlock it, just because, like I said, you burn through those base 20 round magazines basically instantly. So with this, obviously you get 30 rounds in the mag, and the stated downsides are, first up, a reduction to your aim down sight speed, which, when I tested this at 60 FPS, there is no measurable change here, so you don't really have to worry about that. However, our overall movement speed is reduced by about 1.5%, which is very tolerable, and I would say definitely worth it for those extra 10 rounds in the mag. Now, if you want to take your magazine capacity to the next level, you could use the 50 round drum mag. However, this one has some pretty serious downsides to it, unlike the 30 round mag. First up, our aim down sight speed is slowed down to 250 milliseconds. So again, that takes it down to basically assault rifle levels, and it's no longer really fast for an SMG. But far worse than that, our overall movement speed is reduced by about 10%. This brings it down to LMG level movement speed. At that point, this just gives you a very strange gun where it's only really viable in super close range situations, but you move as slow as an LMG. And as a result, I would say just stay away from the 50 round mags unless you're going for some really weird specialized playstyle. In general, the 30 round mags are just a far better choice because it doesn't completely destroy your handling or mobility. But with that, that finally wraps it up for all of the important stats I wanted to share for the ISO SMG. Now I want to get into some great attachment combinations and a recommended class setup. So let's hop into the first class setup I've got here. This one's designed really to be treated as an SMG, so super aggressive, get right up close and personal in the enemy's face. With this, we got the monolithic suppressor to stay off the radar as we're moving around on the flank, just in case they call a UAV in. We've got the collapsible stock on this, so that's going to help with our movement speed as well as our aim down sight speed. We've also got sleight of hand to help us get those super fast reloads in when we're right up close and personal with the enemy players. Then we also have the 30 round magazine, which is a pretty much must have for this gun. Like I said, as long as you have it unlocked, you should definitely be using the 30 round mag. And then finally the Merc foregrip to help a little bit with hipfire, but mainly to help with that first shot recoil jump that you get. The Merc foregrip helps the best in that area. And to top all that off, something that isn't stated with this is the Merc foregrip actually helps with your movement speed as well. So it's just another thing that's going to help you get around the map even faster, so you can treat this properly like an SMG. Now, taking that into an example class setup, our secondary is an M19 with extended mags and fully loaded, and those are two important attachments on that because it gives us a massive amount of reserve ammo that we share with the primary weapon, which is great. This allows us to use EOD in perk 1 instead of having to use scavenger. Then for perk 2, we've got Ghost to stay off the radar, and then finally perk 3 is tune-up, so we can get our Dead Silence field upgrade more frequently, so we can get on the enemy's flank without them hearing us. As for our lethal, this is going to be a C4, and our tactical is a stim shot. And this is the class setup I would use even for the next attachment combination I'm going to be sharing, so let's have a look at that one as well. With this one, it's designed to be a little bit more versatile, so you can challenge people at kind of mid-range comfortably, not just right up close and personal. And with this, we have that Nightshade barrel on there, which is going to help a ton with our range. We get the built-in suppressor, helps with our recoil. It's just a nice attachment for turning this into a more versatile weapon. Then we've got the FTAC Vagrant stock, which is the stock that helps with our aim down sight speed without hurting our recoil. Then we once again have sleight of hand and 30 round mags. I like pairing that up with this gun just because you do burn through even 30 round mags very, very quickly. And then finally, we once again have a Merc foregrip to help with movement speed, hipfire, as well as that first shot recoil. Combined with this barrel, it actually gives you a very accurate fast firing gun. And yeah, like I said, I would put that pretty much into the exact same class setup that I used for the previous attachment combination. And that's going to wrap up today's gun guide on the ISO SMG. As for my initial impressions of this SMG after playing with it a little bit and collecting all the stats and everything, I consider this to be a lower tier SMG. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this gun is unusable and it's bad and you can't do well with it. I'm just saying if you put it side by side with any of the comparable SMGs out there, it's just slightly worse in most ways. There isn't much reason to use this over a P90 or an MP7 or a Fennec, for instance, and those are the three most comparable guns. So yeah, unfortunately, I consider this SMG to be slightly below average, but still very usable. Of course, that is just my opinion. I'd like to hear in the comment section below, what are you guys thinking about the ISO SMG based on your experience with it so far? Also, if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes of Gun Guides, I've already covered every other gun in the game. I will leave a link to the playlist down below. And don't worry, the AN94 Gun Guide, that'll be coming up within the next couple of days. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.